Welcome to the review of The Pedestrian. If this is the first time that you are watching one of my reviews, which are not reviews, it's more my opinion than a professional review. Let me start over. Welcome to my opinion about The Pedestrian, an unprofessional review about this puzzle game. If this is the first time that you are watching one of these reviews, I'll give you a summary of the structure. First, I start with what I was expecting about the game, and then what I actually got when playing the game, and then I make comments about my positives and negatives, the best things that I found in the game, the things that I like the most, and the things that I like least. Those are my negatives. And then I move on to some special mentions, which are things that don't necessarily have to be good or bad. It's just things that I want to point out and make mention of it. In this case, I have only one, and it's more like a question than a comment. And finally, I move on to my final score for the game, which is not a number out of 10. Although it's out of 10, it's a little bit special, and you have to see to understand better than me explaining. But my final scores could be anything. It could be an object, it could be a situation, it could be an intangible thing. So pretty much can be anything, but the rules are that it needs to describe what I felt while playing the game or how I felt. It cannot be another game, and third rule of the robotics, it cannot be a score that I've already given to another game that I've reviewed and given my opinion about. So in having said that, let me start with what I was expecting from this The Pedestrian. So I got to know about this game through a podcast I was listening like a year ago or so, and what I was expecting, it was a game that had, like usually a puzzle game has a gimmick mechanic, and I was expecting this game to have this mechanic, which is moving panels and connecting them in any way that you consider to solve the puzzle, and have this mechanic stretched and exhausted pretty much throughout all of the game, and just make a game and build a game around this mechanic. So it was like not expecting much originality other than this mechanic being exploited, and that's what I was expecting basically. And also not very long, because having just one mechanic, it wouldn't be like a 10-hour game. What I actually got, it's a roughly about 4-5 hour long game, and it combines puzzles with platforms. I wasn't counting to have platforming elements, but they are in here in this game. It has platforming sections, but they are not really important. Other than the character being able to jump, it's not much of a challenge. The jumping sections, it's more like to traverse from point A to point B, other than, hey, you have here a challenge where you have to control your little sticky guy from A to B, and there are some obstacles that you have to avoid. It's not about that. It's more leaning towards the puzzle type of game rather than platforming. And indeed, it has a few mechanics, more than I was expecting, and the game does exhaust them. I will talk more about that later, but actually I believe that even though it exhausts these mechanics, it makes up for that towards the end. And this is spoiler free, I will not talk about what happens in the end section, but the beginning and the end section are very important, because the game, the way I see it, is divided into 3 sections: the presentation, which is beautiful, the middle section, which is a little bit repetitive, and the end section, which is really surprising and it will make an impact on the player. So the middle section, which is the weakest one, maybe it's not that bad. It's still fun and it's still entertaining, but I believe it is the weaker because the other 2 sections are much better and make the middle section, which is, as I said, not that bad, but looks worse compared to the other 2 sections, because the beginning is beautiful and fun and the ending is beautiful and surprising. The middle section is none of that, but it still has some decent puzzle levels. So having Having said this, I was expecting not much, and I got more than I was expecting in a game that's divided into 3 sections, and it starts as beautiful, turns a little bit repetitive, and ends up very surprising. That's what I got. Let me go into detail now, and let me talk about positives or negatives. Where do I start? Usually I start with positives. This time I'll mix them up. I'll go in order from beginning to end because I have 3, 2 positives and 1 negative. Pretty much it's what I already said. The 2 positives are something about the first section and something about the end section. Actually, it's the end section, the whole section. And the negative is the middle section, something in the middle section that I already mentioned. So I'll mix them up and I'll start with the beginning of the game. What first impressed me the most was the music, as I said during the stream, because you are a guy inside a sign, like a traffic sign. I wasn't expecting it to be traversing from sign to sign, and in the background you see the actual 3D environment. It's not like you are 2D, but behind you, the sign where you are in, it's in a 3D environment. So the mix of 2D and 3D, it's not like 2D and top D, but it's kind of similar. It's mixing like 2 realities. You move in a 2D environment, but at the same time you are moving in a 3D environment from sign to sign, and I was impressed positively. At the same time, you start the game, you're kind of in a warehouse with some shelves with boxes, look like they are packing something, and as you move your way out of this warehouse, you go through some sewer and then you are outside in the street. This is not a spoiler, this is like the environments that you go through, and as you travel through these environments, which are not very pretty, it's 1 a warehouse, 2 as a sewer, but the music that goes with you as you are traveling through these environments, it's very pretty. It's too beautiful. As I said during the stream, it's too beautiful compared to the situation where you are in. I don't say it like a negative, I say it as a positive. Actually, this is my first positive, is music. Music in this game is very beautiful, but maybe I feel it's so good because it transported me to a different place. I wasn't in a warehouse or in the sewer, I was in an adventure, and it feels like Frodo leaving Hobbitown and embarking into an adventure into the unexpected. It looks like the beginning of a big adventure. This is how I felt with this music, and it doesn't match with the situation I was in. You are in a ugly, depressing environment, which is a warehouse, nothing exciting, but this music is telling you, hey, wait a few minutes because this is the beginning of a big adventure, and you'll see. It's like the music is ahead of the player, and I was excited to keep playing just because of the music and because this effect of mixing 2D with 3D environments, and it was like, I want to see more, what's next? So that's my first positive, the music that carried most of my interest together with this mixture, but I think the music was more important in the beginning. And now let me swap to the negatives, because after this initial encounter where everything is beautiful, everything is exciting, a big adventure, during this section, this first section, you are presented with the first mechanics. So this game works like this, and it's kind of a tutorial, but it keeps evolving and getting complicated and keeps adding new elements that make the puzzles more interesting, but this is all in the first section. When you get to the middle section of this game, pretty much you've seen all of the elements that appear in the puzzles during these middle sections, like wall doors, levers, elevator lifts, lasers, pushing and pulling boxes, jumping pads. All these elements that appear in the first section is everything that you're going to see in different ways during the middle section. So my only negative is that the middle section, it's not boring, but compared from the beginning, from where you come from, where everything is new and beautiful and exciting, this middle section feels like it is repetitive in some way. It's not boring because the environments where you are in, the panels and the background, they are different, so you feel like you are still traveling and you are moving from one place in the city to another place, but the puzzles themselves, they don't go along with this environment. In my opinion, these different environments like the city streets, the university or the campus should have been more themed, like maybe leave the lasers only for the campus because the campus is a technology university or science or about science, and the lasers make sense in this environment. Maybe leave the boxes just for the warehouse because that's where the boxes are. So I feel like it's not boring because the puzzles are still interesting, but there are no new elements for a section of the game, and that's something that it's been magnified because of the beginning and also the end. If you keep playing and you go through this section, you are still given a new mechanic, which I wasn't expecting at all, because after doing so many puzzles that the same way with the same elements, then you are given one extra mechanic, and I was, oh, maybe this is the end game where this is just to complicate everything that you've been doing and learning before in a completely different way. But there's still more, and after this final mechanic, which is the yellow paint, which I will not explain here what it does, after this you get to the end of the game. Not the end as the ending where you see the credits, it's the end section where you are still playing, and this is actually my second positive, which is the end section itself. This end section is the same game, but you play in a completely different way that you cannot foresee. Maybe this is also accentuated because the middle section is repetitive and suddenly you are solving the same kind of puzzles but in a completely different way, and it's so out of place, but at the same time it feels it belongs to the game because the puzzles are the same, you are still doing the same, but the way you solve them is completely different, and it makes you think in a different way. So this end section, it blew my mind because I wasn't expecting it at all. And this is spoiler free, I will not talk about what happens near the end, but you need to see to believe. A few games have done this, I have to say, but this is one of those that it doesn't feel like a copy, and it does it very well, and what it does, it perfectly matches the theme of the game, still feels like it belongs, and it's very well put and very well solved. So these are my two positives. The music, especially in the beginning, is more noticeable, and the end section, which is super surprising, and my only negative, which is pretty much they match the three sections: the music in the beginning, the repetitiveness in the second section, and the surprise within the end section. Finally, for my comments before the final score, I have to say something. This is my special mention. What's going on with glasses and TVs in this game? I need someone to tell me what's going on with them, because they are everywhere. Glasses, they might be okay, but TVs, they are placed in places where they don't belong and they don't make sense. These TVs are CRT TVs, like old TVs. And in the beginning I was, okay, they might be related to a collectible or something, or a mechanic in the future that you have to trace back and find them, or something like secret, or maybe later they give me a power up that I can do something with them. But I finished the game and I didn't find any reference to glasses or TVs, and maybe there are other objects that also are recurrent but I didn't notice. But there are so many, like it's not by chance, that it's not a 3D model that you put in the level just for decoration. There are so many times that it feels like you want to tell me something, but I'm not getting what you're saying. I was expecting to understand by the end of the game, but I finished the game and I still have no clue what they mean, what they are doing, if they are for something. I'm still curious. I need someone to tell me what they do, if they actually do something. So finally, in having said this, let me tell you my final score for The Pedestrian. Is an Ender's Game out of 10. In this this case, I'm referencing the movie, not the book, because that's what I have experienced. Because this game, it starts as being exciting and everything is beautiful, although you are in an environment that it's not beautiful in itself. In the case of the Pedestrian, the music makes it more exciting and you feel like you are starting a big adventure and you are excited for what's coming because you have great things to do, same as the characters in the movie. And then you move on to the middle section of the game, where everything that you've been doing so far, it turns a little bit repetitive and like it's going nowhere, like you don't see the purpose in the case of the movie. But in the game, all of the elements that compose the puzzles, you've already seen them before in the beginning, in the initial section. So the puzzles are still interesting, like when you do something you like but you do it again and again and again and it turns repetitive, you're still enjoying what you do because it's what you love doing. But you would appreciate a little bit of diversity, and this is what happens in this middle section. It's still fun, but there's nothing exciting about them. There are no new elements and the environments keep changing, but the puzzles themselves, they feel repetitive. And then you move on to the final part, and then suddenly you find the unexpected, like similar to what happens in the movie. Everything that you've been doing, now it has a different meaning. So this final section, you're still playing the same game, but in a different way. And the only thing I can say is that I'm sure it will surprise you, as it blew my mind. And it's out of place, but it feels it belongs to this game at the same time, which is great. It's perfect. So I see a lot of parallels between what I felt playing this game and the movie Ender's Game, and that's my final score. An Ender's Game out of 10. Now, tell me in the comments what would be your final score, and positives and negatives if you've played, or what you think about my score. Let me know in the comments because I would like to know, and sharing is caring. And this is it for this review. I hope to see you soon with a new opinion and unprofessional review very soon. So until then, bye now.